Hey folks, Dave back here again. Another morning video today. Yep, got the coffee going and everything today, so we're back here for another morning video. And this one here is for the hockey fans of the channel. Is I'm going to be doing a book review for Icing on the Plains, The Rough Ride of the Kansas City Scouts by Troy Treasure. And this book was actually recommended to me in one of my Facebook hockey groups, old-time hockey groups. And I was like, I got to check this book out. So I did. I picked it up on Amazon. As you can see, it's on the iPad here. I think I paid less than $9 for it. And yeah, I couldn't put it down. This is a really good book here about the Kansas City Scouts. So you might be saying, Dave, why do I want to read a book on the Kansas City Scouts? Well, it's more than just the Kansas City Scouts. It does a pretty good job of, Troy does a good job of giving you what was going on in Kansas City at the time. He goes through a history of hockey in Kansas City, which I didn't know that it was, but he did. And he talks about, the football team, the baseball team, the basketball team in the Kansas City area, and how they played a small part in bringing the NHL into Kansas City. Obviously he goes over, how the Scouts were formed and the whole bit, and even how the NHL really screwed over the Scouts and the Washington Capitals. They both came in as expansion teams in '74, and if you go back into the record books and look at some of the futility of NHL teams, Scouts and the Capitals are right there in '74, '75. They didn't give these guys a fighting chance at all, and that's a shame because they were really bad teams, really bad losing streaks, and it's amazing that the Washington survived as bad as they were. Kansas City, as you know, lasted 2 years, and they ended up going to Colorado, and then eventually to New Jersey, where they did win some cups, so that's good for that franchise. The Capitals, as you know, won the cup a couple of years ago, so, they started rough in '74, but they have ended up winning a cup. So happy endings for both organizations at the end, but back in '74, when this book was, the time era for this book, boy, I tell you, it was pretty bad. In fact, it was so bad that the NHL really went out of their way with the Vegas Golden Knights. The Vegas Golden Knights went all the way to the finals their first year, and that's because of the rules they put in place. They did not want another repeat of a Scouts or a Capitals expansion year. That just, even in the book, Troy talks about the people that he interviewed said, in hindsight, it was a bad idea to have these two teams fail as bad as they did. It wasn't good for hockey. It wasn't good for the NHL. So the NHL went out of their way, maybe overcorrected the situation with the Vegas Golden Knights. But anyway, so back to the book here. There's a little bit of history of Kansas City hockey. It was the other sports, and then it goes into how the Scouts were picked. It actually does a pretty good job. He almost does a game-by-game recap of the games they played. And a lot of those I read, but some I did skip over. But some of the key games, like games against the Bruins I read, games against the Seals I read. And you had a pretty good idea of what was going on with the team and hockey at the times, and the hurdles the guys were coming over as far as getting the new rink going and where they were going to put the rink in Kansas City and how it was actually late opening up to getting people into the stadium to watch the games. It's all talked about in the book, the struggles that they had when they went on the road, things that were happening, the schedule that they had, and all these factors come into play at why they didn't play so well. And it went into some of the trades they made to make the team better. It went into some of the front office decisions and the whole bit, and it followed them through year one, and then year two started up, and you could see the wheels coming off the wagon in year two, and then how it all, it came to an ultimate demise, and then the team actually packed up and moved to Colorado after 2 seasons. And then after all said and done, when the team packed up, he actually does a little recap of a bunch of the players and front office people with the Scouts and what they went on to do and how they fared and things like that. In fact, one unique story was one of the people involved in the Scouts went off to found a company called Icing, okay? And Icing are the visors that go on the helmets there. He basically invented the plastic visor that goes on the hockey helmet. I've actually used them. I had no idea where Icing came from, but it was one of the people associated with the Scouts that started this company called Icing. And I think he went on to say they sold to Bauer or somebody like that. Yeah, it's an interesting read. There was some things I did skip over a little bit because it was just I didn't need to read every game detail. But I mean, it's all there if you want to. The other thing that was really neat about this book here, Icing on the Plains, is I'm a big fan of defunct hockey leagues and defunct hockey teams in my lifetime. 30s, 40s, 50s. But 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, hockey teams that came and went, leagues that came and went. It's always been a little an interest of mine. Admittedly, the Kansas City Scouts were at the bottom of that list. I was 7 years old when the Scouts came into play in '74. They played a couple years and left, so you didn't have time to love them or hate them. They were in and out so fast. They were just kind of an afterthought. And as someone who's a big fan of defunct teams or whatever, I just never gave them a second thought. The thing is, the Scouts is that, they don't have the flamboyancy of the California Seals. Let's say the Seals, they're on their own island. They're unbelievable. The Seals, right? And then, they didn't, and the Scouts didn't have the allure of the Nordiques or the Whalers, let's say. So, of all the teams that came and went, the Scouts, they just didn't do it for me. I could give or take them, but I'm actually glad I read this book because I actually learned a lot about the Scouts, learned a lot about a hockey in the '70s, and actually what these books do. What's really good about these books here? And I've read a book about the Seals, and I think I read a book about the WHA, and now I get this book here. It does a really good job of for me personally filling in the blanks. Of that time period, because I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. You remember certain things, and certain things you don't remember, and you're like, oh, I remember guys like Wolf Paymont. I remember him, and it talks a lot about him, how he went from the Scouts to the Rockies and eventually to the Maple Leafs. It talks about some of the goalies, Michel Placé and Dennis Herron and Peter McDuff, and the only way I knew these guys is I had their hockey cards. Okay, and maybe they would come to Boston and play a game, and you see them on TV 38. But aside from that, I didn't know much about the Scouts or hockey at the time. So books like these, they really fill in the gaps. Because as I was reading this book, I was like, oh, that's what happened here, or that's how this guy came into play on this team, or that's what happened that night. So there's a lot of holes that this book actually fills in for me personally, which I really enjoy, and that's what these books do a really good job of, is kind of going back and telling the story, and it's like, oh, I remember that, or so it was really good as far as filling holes for me in my my hockey memory from the '70s. But anyway, so yeah. Icing on the Plains, Story of the Kansas City Scouts by Troy Treasure. We're actually going to try to get him on the show. I don't know if I'm going to have him on my channel here, if we're going to have him on Digital to Dice to talk 70s sports in general, because he's a reporter right now, and I've been talking to him on Facebook. But yeah, if you're a fan of hockey in the '70s, this was a good read. This was a good read. Again, I picked this up, the electronic version. I think it was $8.99 or $8.79 on Amazon. I picked it up, but I think I read it in 3 days. I really flew through this book. Very interesting read. So anyway, that's my book review of Icing on the Plains by Troy Treasure. I would say it's a must for hockey fans of the '70s, and if you like defunct teams, it gives a really good job of talking about what happened to these teams that came and went. So anyway, I'm Dave. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.